She wrote by a lone desk lamp, ink dark as winter water, hand steady despite tremor. The page bore ghosts carefully summoned, names aligned like coordinates no map could hold. Outside, frost stippled the yard, breath of a black stallion limbing the fence with steam. She paused over one sentence, listening to the wind test the window's patience. Survival isn't punishment, she decided. It is unfinished duty, traveling under scar and silence. She closed her eyes, and the room exhaled. In memory, the lamp clicked off, plunging everything into a hold-your-breath hush. Somewhere, a rope creaked without mercy. Snow crystals brightened to hard daylight. The silence inverted into blood humming like a live wire. The page blurred, turned vertical, then sky, then needles, then pain. The world tilted, and gravity claimed its due with unarguable hands. The forest hung upside down, needles like spears aimed at a swallowing sky. Blood pressed hot into her skull, drumming a battlefield cadence older than reason. She counted breaths the way soldiers count blessed seconds between mortars. Sunlight hammered across her eyes, then smeared into white ribbons of heat. Wind carried resin, penny-taste copper, old smoke that wasn't here, yet was everywhere. A crow heckled from a high limb, black punctuation over an unfinished sentence. She tried to bring knees toward ribcage. The rope answered with fibers grinding bone. Her boots scraped bark, pulled slivers, found no anchor. Far off, water talked to stone like a secret meeting refusing minutes. The world's axis moaned above her, and the forest held its verdict until hoofbeats stitched a new possibility across the ground.
Gunfire cracked in memory, and spruce shadows jumped as if struck, past and present overlapping. Dust devils lifted over ruined Afghan walls, then collapsed into Wyoming mist. The same metallic taste nested under her tongue, mouth gone dry enough to rasp prayers without words. She remembered the lad whose grin outran his rank, laughter turning to breathless surprise. Heat shimmered over wreckage, mirage turning men into ghosts, ghosts into coordinates. In the present, sap gleamed like amber tears where knives had worried bark. The noose bit deeper, pulse loud as rotors, each thud another missing name. She let the desert sun and the forest's glare fight inside her eyelids. Footsteps that weren't boots halted beneath her spinning horizon. Breath, heavy and warm, rose toward her like a question carved from muscle. He stepped from mist the color of extinguished stars, high drinking light like a secret. A pale seam scored his shoulder, old story stitched into moving shadow. He circled once, twice, hooves folding the leaf litter into quiet decisions. Steam drifted from his nostrils, patterning the cold, metronome for a failing body's will. Her chest hitched at the impossible, wildness choosing proximity, danger choosing witness, instinct choosing duty. He studied the rope with a warrior's attention, ears flicking, eyes dark as unlit wells. Lips pulled, teeth found hemp, pressure built until fibers sang a splintering song. The branch protested, then conceded. Gravity reclaimed her with brutal intimacy. Earth slammed breath from lungs, scattering stars across edges of vision. Above, the stallion stood immovable, as if guarding the threshold between ending and again.
Pain spoke every language at once, ankle a furnace, ribs a chorus of broken glass. She tasted metal, dirt, and something wild like thunder sleeping under skin. The stallion lowered to the ground, folding mass with ceremonial grace, offering without ownership. She crawled, palms abrading, world strobing between present ache and old explosions. Mane gripped like rope over water. She dragged, failed, dragged again, found purchase. His lift was tide-like, lifting her into a warmer gravity than memory allowed. They moved into darkness shaped by granite teeth and wolf-sung horizons. Cold stream water bit through boots, then anesthetized panic, then sharpened everything useful. Hoofbeats stitched night into a blanket, covering shaking, holding edges together. The moon watched them pass like a tired medic, counting, then deciding the count could continue. Fluorescent light hummed like a wasp in a jar, casting sickly truth across bandages. A camera lens waited, patient as a rifle barrel, red dots steady at the corner. The room smelled of disinfectant, coffee ghosts, and paper that liked to witness. Questions stacked like files, route, signature, authorization, motive, everything arguing routine. She tracked the edges of a map taped to cinder block, saw red corrections where trust should live. A pen tapped once, twice, a metronome for bureaucratic disbelief. She said nothing, letting silence be the first accurate report of the night. Outside the one-way glass, faces practiced neutrality that cracked at the corners. The light felt like noon over a killing ground, yet snow still clung to boots. She folded memory into breath, saved the answer for the next cut.
Before the rope, there was a room that hated dirt with ritual devotion. The desk's edges were soldier straight, files stacked like thin gravestones awaiting names. Maps pinned with surgical neatness glared brighter than any window would allow. His shirt creased like fresh money. His smile never quite reached working temperature. He slid a map across polished wood, trails bent in ways mountains refused to accept. Arrows pointed nowhere worth living, a red choreography leading into cul-de-sacs of harm. She felt sand under her nails despite the carpet, a phantom warning disguised as grit. Radios chirped elsewhere, laughter diluted in hallways, normalcy rehearsing competence. She left with 2 maps, one state-approved, one earned by blisters and weather. The door clicked shut, and something older than orders told her to check everything twice. Deep in the grove, silence wore a lid none of the birds could lift. A collapsed tent slumped like a punctured lung, tarp whispering secrets nobody planned to record. Tin cans carried the breath of beans, grease clinging with stubborn memory of heat. Boot prints pressed intentions into mud, several sizes, weight forward, hurry stamped at edges. Bark scars mapped a hurried theft, axe strokes drunk on haste, not labor. In the ash, a cigarette butt wrote its last letter to the wind. She photographed every careless confession, the lens greedier for truth than any witness. Far away, the station joked about coffee. Here, the forest stored its verdict. The air tightened like a trigger pulled halfway, and every leaf rehearsed stillness. Footsteps arrived like a decision, and luck removed its safety without apology.
They came from green shadow at once. Patternless clothes, purposeful eyes, economy of cruelty. A club-kissed bone, a stone-introduced shoulder to numbness, a pistol juggled air. She aimed once, sky answered. Then numbers did what numbers do to courage. Training stepped forward, polite through pain, elbows writing reminders in jaws and lungs. Ground rose with terrible competence. Zip ties bit wrists with plastic certainty. Boots announced ownership nobody signed for. Laughter filed victory under DZ. Somewhere, a fourth voice counted lives in a different language, still fluent in profit. They dragged her through needles until a tree accepted the rope with veteran patience. The world inverted again, and her vision narrowed to a tunnel lined with wolves. High above fate, the branch creaked like a witness, wishing for deafness. As blood pooled in Skull's pocket, Afghanistan walked in uninvited and rearranged furniture. Mortars stitched the horizon. Burning rubber taught the air to taste bitter. She remembered dragging a boy whose jokes outran bullets until statistics interrupted. Radio static tried to birth meaning and delivered grief, loud and repeated. Betrayal arrived without a face, wearing any uniform that paid its tab on time. Metals later weighed like polite stones, ribbons indexing a story that refused to reconcile. Cities had choked her afterwards, alleys shaped like ambushes, laughter too bright to forgive. Forests promised honest deaths at least. Storms didn't pretend mercy they didn't own. Now a horse breathed below her, and the math changed without debating policy. Somewhere, a promise formed with no words, only hoofbeats and a rope's surrender.
Rain tested the glass like scouts, pattering code that wanted to be read carefully. Tubing coiled from the IV like domesticated vines, delivering clarity one drop at a time. Gauze smelled like new beginnings, reluctantly agreed upon by bruises and skin. Outside the fence, the stallion stood where the dark turned lamplight into armor. He didn't flicker or fidget, just watched as if clocks took instruction from him. Rumors moved down the hallway wearing coffee cups and shaky laughter that wanted believing. A doctor counted beats, found a rhythm stubborn enough to sign consent forms. She woke to the sound of breathing not hers, deeper, steadier, engine-like. The world narrowed to that sound, and panic exited the room without credentials. Dawn applied primer to the ridgeline, and the day promised more questions than mercy. A ranger's phone caught an image that refused to stay local, data-hungry. Smoke haunted the corridor, ceiling dust falling like tired snow shaken from rafters. Knees on linoleum, arms around a bleeding giant, she looked smaller than rumor remembered. The bandage whitened his flank, brightness against a night colored to the edges. The frame traveled faster than authority, headlines teaching strangers how to pronounce fragile names. Some called it miracle, others called it editing. Most called it what they needed. The horse acquired a moniker, the Watcher, as if legend had been waiting. With each share, the story diluted and concentrated simultaneously, strange alchemy of attention. She ignored the ring of screens, returned to hay dust and iodine and breath. Fame knocked, found the lats complicated, and kept knocking anyway with plastic knuckles.
In a room less tidy than truth prefers, Naomi spread printouts like tarot. Access logs nested timestamps. Midnight edits winked like trap eyes in scrub brush. Secondary credentials ghosted the database. Somebody had borrowed authority with practiced ease. A single initial kept repeating, neat as a squared-away bed, impersonal as policy. Phone records clipped sentences in Spanish, cadence of money disagreeing with duty. Witness statements smelled of burnt coffee and reluctant courage, fragments that fit when turned carefully. She mapped footsteps through hallways without moving, letting fluorescent hum conduct persistence. With each new line, the trail brightened to a sharp arrow wearing a smile. Outside, wind moved the flag a few inches, agreement without celebration. Naomi closed her fist around a pen, and ink decided the direction daylight would travel. He had practiced the supportive tilt of head, gentle concern laminated for meetings. Praise came calibrated to deflect suspicion, landing softly where oversight sleeps. But greed smells like a particular metal, and even paper eventually develops breath. The altered map sang his signature in red, a tune care could hear. Late-night doors remembered hinges complaining under certain weight, a rhythm habitual and smug. The station's gossip avoided names but painted his shoes accurately, shine like confession. He thought the forest belonged to files, and files belonged to whoever financed storms. Betrayal didn't happen suddenly, it accrued like ice on eaves, unnoticed until collapse. When cuffs finally kissed his wrists, he looked past faces toward an escape clause. The light outside the SUV didn't bend for him, and that was new.
Night arrived carrying heat lightning and a rumor of consequence nobody believed. Fluorescence blinked, sighed, went out together, as if commanded by a previous failure. Generators should have rescued the narrative,
but silence answered the baton instead. Radios spat static like frightened snakes, then curled into mute wire in drawers. Boots hurried down corridors, preparation colliding with the ugly logistics of surprise. The gate complained, metal to metal, then screamed as if bitten by wolves. Dogs found courage and then limits. Their voices broke into fragments scattered by gunfire. She cinched Kevlar over tenderness, breath counting past pain's negotiation attempts. Flashlights parsed smoke into useless slices, and the hallway lost its vanishing point. Outside, someone invested in darkness, and the return promised brutal interest. Muzzle flashes stitched impatient constellations, brief stars mapping a sky nobody wanted. Splinters stung skin, drywall chalked the air, brass rolled like angry insects. She measured targets by breath, exhalation reducing shake into choices knives could respect. Naomi's voice cut clean through chaos, strategy braided to steadiness without decorative knots. A ranger bled from the shoulder. She dragged him with muscles that remembered deserts. Shots answered shots. Doors collected scars. Radios relearned vocabulary after power returned halfway. The evidence room became a church for paper, faith guarded by velocity and will. Outside, footsteps reorganized. Inside, resolve doubled and demanded receipts in casing. The house shuddered at certain impacts, then steadied, a tired boxer refusing the count. Somewhere beyond smoke, a hoof struck gravel, and the night altered its posture.
He burst through shattered glass like thunder, wearing muscle, shadow, and decision. The stallion filled the corridor, eyes burning with something ancient as rainfall. A bullet found flank. Sound became a hammer. Time paused to watch. He staggered, then planted like a standard, refusing every order gravity issued. Even men disciplined by money forgot training long enough to stare at wonder. She moved without thinking, fury stripping fear to usable wire, purpose humming. The traitor aimed high, but ceilings cannot bleed, only drop patient dust. The fight tightened to elbows and breath, the kind of war without poetry. Handcuffs finally concluded eloquence, metal writing a period at the end of power. Around them, smoke curled worshipfully toward the animal who had chosen a side. He sank by inches that measured lifetimes, breath pulling rope from nothing. Her hands pressed against heat, finding pulse like a wounded drum insisting on music. The floor smelled of cordite, bleach, and penny iron. Memory added desert wind. Veterinarians arrived with boxes that clicked. Needles found rivers. Compresses turned red. The wound threaded muscle, luck whispering it had missed the vault of organs. Sedation gentled eyes without dimming recognition. Earflick brushed her sleeve like gratitude. Outside, cameras rehearsed astonishment. Inside, work broke miracles into steps and tape. She kept whispering promises the room didn't need to overhear to believe. Somewhere, a decision took root. Survival would be meaning, not a sentence extended. Dawn gathered itself on the threshold and waited for permission to proceed.
Glass glittered like brittle frost along baseboards, and bleach wore the air like armor. Federal jackets moved through rooms with notebooks, gloves, and the patience of aftershocks. The SUV doors swallowed the traitor's fury, leaving only dented arrogance behind. In that absence, corridors remembered being hallways instead of battlegrounds. She stood, ribs hurting like unfinished conversations, watching authority finally arrive on time. Reporters orbited the fence, microphones thirsty, lenses offering quick conversions of pain into spectacle. She considered speaking and chose to feed a horse instead, a better economy. The map lay on a table, red marks now evidence instead of prophecy. Justice felt administrative, not holy, yet necessary, like roofs during weather. She breathed, and the breath didn't hitch. That counted as a victory measurable in daylight. Weeks unspooled in hay-dusted air under a roof that loved rain's drumming. The stallion learned stillness with her, breath braided, scars comparing notes like veterans. Bandages came off. A new seam joined the old, parallel roads of survival. She read maps like prayers, lips moving over ridges, streams, and remembered errors.
Officials arrived with safe offers boxed in language that smelled like carpeting. She declined politely. Allegiance pledged to dirt, cold water, thin air, honest edges. Naomi grinned around hard days, and the station learned a quieter kind of laughter. The story traveled outward, while the work traveled inward, slow stitching under headlines. One morning, the stallion stepped into light without a tremor, darkness releasing his flank. He nuzzled her sleeve, then faced the field as if the horizon had answered. She led him to pasture when frost still silked grass into silver arguments. The collar unclipped with a sound mercifully small, as if freedom preferred understatement. He weighed morning, listened to wind arithmetic, then trotted beyond the fence's suggestion. Muscles unscrolled, mane took dictation from air, hooves wrote cursive across dew. She stood with hands empty, feeling both ache and rightness rethreaded into one cloth. A younger ranger spoke hope softly. She let maybe be its own weather. The yard remembered hoofbeats, then stored them like a favorite song nobody admits. Night returned without him, and she practiced not looking at the gate. On the fourth dawn, fog unbuttoned slowly, and a silhouette stitched itself precise. He stood there again, steam weathing him, decision made where words never travel. Paper needed a title. She gave it one that could survive fieldwork and winter. Echo Mustang Recon Unit sounded like an oath whispered to practical gods. The pitch avoided leashes, avoided ownership, trusted hooves to choose partnership. Some men scoffed because wildness offends filing cabinets and predictable budgets. She kept speaking in topography, risk tables, and scenarios batteries fail to respect. Horses sense water beneath gravel, fault lines under leaf duff, storms before radios. They go where wheels stutter and drones freeze, mapping by tendon, ear, and memory. Liability blinked in the fluorescent light. Oversight cleared its throat. Signatures practiced courage. Funding arrived quietly, enough to build a pilot out of hard mornings. Outside, the stallion flicked an ear as if bureaucracy had finally learned breath. Frost crackled under boots when the mission brief exhaled into quiet agreement. The quadrant matched old red slashes, now bait for a different hunt entirely. She packed tenderness into straps, bruises into adjustments, caution into every clipped buckle. Naomi checked radios with a ritual that comforted wires into behaving. The stallion stood like a piece of night the sun hadn't managed yet. She mounted using choreography pain had taught slowly, grip finding the living handle. No saddle lied about ownership. Balance made its own treaty with gravity. Rangers at the porch saluted with coffee mugs. Respect throttled down to warmth. The gate swung, remembered the last time, and chose to be only a hinge. They entered the grove's throat again, this time with a keeper watching from both sides. Sun threaded pale gold through boughs, measuring distance in beads across needles. Birdsong cautiously returned, a soundtrack tempered by memory's reluctance to celebrate. Hooves tested soil, then stone, then rot disguised as confidence under moss. The stallion paused at a slope that looked innocent to impatient maps. His ear pivoted, then his weight shifted, reading ground like a medic reads skin. She dismounted, pressed palm to dirt, and felt the tremble under surface. A bearing coil waited, metal hungry for ankles, hired by men who hate terrain. She flagged the spot, breath steady, gratitude edged with anger shaped like patience. Further on, fresh paint scarred bark, a breadcrumb trail of theft toward profit. The forest told everything, as always, to anyone who listened without hurrying the answer.
Wind turned thin, and cloud shadows practiced being storms across distant ridges. Wolf prints stitched a creek bank, story threaded beside human treads less elegant. The stallion drank, muscles rearranging reflections into something older than language. She scanned upriver, caught flash of aluminum where cunning masqueraded as forgetfulness. A cable spanned gorge height, naked and mean, awaiting a load the land refused. She photographed angles, logged bearings, cataloged insult, let fury remain usefully cool. Downwind, fuel stink contradicted pine, and the day's patience tightened its belt. They backed out carefully, rebuilding silence behind them, sewing the forest shut. On the ridge, radio caught a fickle signal and carried it across stone. Names and coordinates left her mouth, finally traveling faster than any betrayal. Back at the station, evidence found folders that treated it like returning family. Red ink lost its prophecy, gained the dignity of past tense under staples. Naomi translated field breath into case law, chain of custody breathing evenly. The traitor's name grew footnotes, then charges, then schedules with judges and metal detectors. She stood by the stall and let hay dust give her hands an occupation. The stallion watched her quietly, scar to scar, both of them veteran cartographers. Across the yard, younger rangers lifted their eyes differently when radios spoke. The grove kept its secrets less tightly now, consenting to an audit without bitterness. The sky decided on snow, then changed its mind, then promised later. Under the changing light, work continued, unspectacular, relentless, perfect as recovery.
Night returned with glass in its breath and old questions sharpening like knives. The office hummed with a lamp's patience and a mug's remembered warmth. She opened the leather notebook that had ridden in deserts and hospitals. The page weighted the way gauze waits, ready to cover what bleeds honestly. She wrote to the names she carried like medals hidden from parade routes. Survival is duty unfinished, she wrote, and duty is love refusing surrender. She admitted the penance, the years dedicated to tidy, quiet disappearance. Then she wrote the horse in, ink tracing a shadow that found her hanging. Wildness chose her, and now she chose back. Partnership without halter, oath without collar. When she signed the page with breath steadier than months ago, dawn answered. She closed the notebook, set it among maps that finally served more than authority. Boots found the yard, crunching old stars hidden in frost, small fireworks underfoot. The stallion stood at the fence line where fog turned breath into drifting handwriting. Steam curled from nostrils, patience visible, sentinel without orders except his own. She laid her palm against warmth that refused winter's argument, scar under glove. The horizon peeled, gold leaking into blue, making edges honest again. The station behind them exhaled, wood relaxing into day, glass shrugging off night. Work lists would fill, radios would chatter, fences would complain. She would go anyway. In that minute, time held still like a held breath that wanted keeping. Duty looked like two silhouettes refusing to move because watch is a promise.
Seasons would revolve like chambered rounds, each click a new landscape wearing familiar teeth. Spring would loosen the creek until it bragged louder than generators ever could. Summer would wrinkle horizons with heat, making mirage where maps swore bedrock. Autumn would write flame across leaves, then ask rain to edit with restraint. Winter would sand everything down until truth shone through scratches made by living. The stallion would leave and return according to equations only wild things solve. Naomi would add young rangers to a ledger of competence, her grin explaining standards. Paperwork would trail field work like a loyal dog, always arriving breathless and useful. The grove would keep singing warnings if someone showed up to listen carefully. She would, because survival had become a vow written in hoofbeats and ink. Back at the desk, the lamp burned small but refused surrender, ember of intention. She unfolded the earlier sentence and let it become the voiceover for everything. Survival isn't punishment, it is duty unfinished, carried forward by scar and breath. Outside, the stallion drifted toward shadow where dawn still tasted of iron. She pictured the rope breaking, the first night ride, the blood, the smoke's sermon. She pictured cuffs, signatures, steady hands, and patience earning what violence always denies. The letter lay closed, but the day opened, and the route waited without apology. She stood, feeling ribs speak quietly of storms survived and work deserved.
The forest's mouth ahead would be dark, then bright, then honest as ever. She stepped toward it, and the black horse moved with her, keeper, keeping.